Hello everybody and welcome back. Good to talk to all of you again today. And before I get into today's content, just a word. Some of you probably noticed that in the last 2 weeks I really haven't posted much content. And you might be wondering what I've been up to. And I did mention in last week's video in the comment section that I was exploring a thing in real life. Well, I still can't give you a lot of details just because, that's how things are, but it does have something to do with that realistic naval game that I mentioned quite a while back. Like I said, can't really talk too much about it yet as things are obviously still kind of in motion. But when I do finally have permission to talk about things and reveal more details, I will have a video dealing with that. Alright, so on to today's video. Now today's video is, well, it's basically a couple examples of something that I want to kind of talk about. So these days, I still get questions from people who come up to me and say, how do I improve my win rate? Like, I'm still stuck here at 50%, or I'm still stuck at like 55%. How do I improve my win rate, right? And I'm like, okay, do you understand the mechanics of what's going on? Do you understand how to use those mechanics to your advantage? And, sometimes I'll have people who say, yes, I figured out the mechanics, but I'm still not winning. To which I must then ask, how's your decision making? Because most likely what's happening is your decision making isn't up to par. It's just not up to where it's supposed to be. And that's why you're not really improving in that win rate department. So take a look at this engagement against the enemy team here. And the enemy team is going to make a whole series of really, really poor decisions. And these poor decisions is going to cost them the win. And again, if they sort of do this long term, the win rates are going to suffer, right? So first things first, this Dmitry Donskoy, okay, up against the battleship, where your own battleships sort of run away from you. Okay, fine. But right now, take a look at the enemy ships. Enemy has 2 battleships and a destroyer. Aerial Ace 110's team has an Iowa and himself in the Alsace. This should be a really, really easy win for the enemy team. The North Carolina on their team, which, can bow tank an Iowa, because, again, 32mm bow cannot be overmatched by anything except for 460mm guns, can bow tank the Iowa, wait until the Iowa moves into a vulnerable position, shoot into the Citadel, delete the Iowa. The North Carolina does not have to reverse at all. In fact, the North Carolina can simply opt to just go forward and ram the Iowa. Hey, if the North Carolina rams the Iowa and the Alsace rams Ariel, game's over. Instead, the North Carolina decides to go and reverse out full broadside into Ariel's guns, where in this kind of position, the Alsace is going to ruin your day. So, yeah, not really sure what that North Carolina was deciding to think. Again, it could be not understanding the mechanics, not understanding what his ship is capable of. But again, bad decision making all around, not seeing the big picture. Alright, but if the North Carolina does poorly in this engagement, this Alsace does, well, you'll see. Enemy team has 3 ships. Ariel's team is just down to him and an Alsace. That enemy Alsace, it's not rocket science. You just charge right forward and you ram. Game is over, your team wins. Instead, the Alsace, I think this Alsace is gonna just decide to go for a drive-by? Why? I have no idea. I don't understand what the thinking is. There's no way Ariel's gonna be able to outrun your Alsace, going in reverse, right? But yeah, decides to instead go for the very greedy drive-by, doesn't execute it properly either, and now puts himself into a really bad position because he's still trying to turn to get his guns onto target or something, but take a look at what position he puts himself into. He puts himself into a broadside position while Ariel's able to maintain a very nicely angled position. This was a really poor play by the Alsace. Very, very poor. Gets sunk. And now Ariel has to deal with 2 enemy ships, the North Carolina and the destroyer. Now, the North Carolina wasn't very healthy the last time we saw him, and he has managed to heal up a little bit, although has also managed to get himself sort of stuck in an island. This is not looking good. So if you're a Destroyer player right now, and you see this about to unfold, you just have to do one thing. You just have to turn and run. That's it, because you only have 4 minutes left. The big battleship can't outspot you, period. And essentially, you can just waste time, run away, and if the battleship goes for one cap, you just go in the opposite direction, head for the other one. That would guarantee you a win. Instead, the destroyer opts to pew pew with his guns, because I guess maybe in his mind he could probably gun down a battleship. Yeah, that's not really gonna work, unfortunately. Not in this kind of situation. Had you still had battleship friends, maybe that would have been okay, because the battleship would have been spotted, but not happening anymore. So, best decision would have been to just turn and run as quickly as possible. Instead, the destroyer leaves it way too late. I think only around here does he decide, okay, maybe it's time to run, but take a look at the range, right? Got proxy spotted, and against an Alsace with that amount of firepower, it's game over. And so, a match that should have been perfectly winnable is basically thrown away. And I'd almost make you a wager, because I haven't actually looked at this myself, but I'd make you a wager that if you were to actually look up the win rate of those 3 players, that probably not a single one of them is going to be over 55%. And definitely not a single one of them is going to be into that 60% range at all. Okay, so moving on to another battle, and this is my battle, one that I played in the Normandy a couple days ago. And I thought here, the enemy team did pretty well. They did pretty well. And then they sort of screwed up. So take a look at the situation. My team is actually very spread out. Very, very bad concentration of firepower right now. In front of me, I've got a Hood, which just got sunk right there. I've got a Destroyer, right? I've got a Congo who's kind of further back to a little bit sort of south there. I have a New Mexico and a Miyoko that's really south, really far away. And I have a Scharnhorst that's to my north. Now the enemy team here, in my opinion, actually do really, really well. And I'm not sure if it's even on purpose or not, or maybe they just simply happen to, stumble together. But really, really good overall decision here, because we're so spread apart. We can't really, hardcore focus down any one area or to hold a certain area. So what they've done is they've grouped up a large chunk of their battleships along the 3-4 line, and they're making this sort of combined push up. There is no way for me to hold back that many battleships, and this is why you see me turn away, right? Decide, nope, I'm not going to stay here. This is really bad. I'm going to try to keep fighting, but I'm going to turn away. And again, I have mentioned this before. You have to know that there are certain situations where you just have to turn away. Although timing that turn is important. So this is where that, hey, you should know your mechanics part comes in. You have to know, alright, out of the enemy ships that are right in front of me, who is most likely to be able to hurt me, right? Who is going to be able to overmatch my armor? Who is going to have the best sort of firepower? Who's going to have crappy dispersion? Who's going to have the best dispersion, etc., etc., etc. And by understanding your mechanics, you know how to time things, like where you're going to be able to turn to minimize the amount of damage that you're going to take. So as you can tell, even though I was under fire from quite a few ships, I was able to pretty much make it out with still reasonable amount of HP, allowing me to continue fighting. Again, pay attention here. Enemy team had a pretty darn good push. They had a pretty darn good push up the 3-4 line, and there is nothing my team could do. So the rational thing to do right now for this enemy team really is to keep pushing. Continue to be aggressive, continue to push. Make the most out of my team's sort of tactical mistakes or strategic mistakes, whichever way you want to look at this, and capitalize on it. But the enemy team, they start to make mistakes here, right? Initially, they were nice focused on the 3-4 line, but right there, you start to see mistakes being made. The Fuso, the Congo on their team have turned in. I think they're trying to make a beeline for the cap. A little bit too early, if you ask me. And if you take a look at the other ships, the Bayern, the King George, they're not really in on the action. They're still just a little bit further back, a little bit too far out. And so it allows me to take a very, very unfavorable engagement against multiple battleships and really turn into something a lot more manageable. Essentially, like a 2-on-2, because I do have a destroyer over there. And of course, if you are the Mahan player, I apologize here. I should have held that salvo because that should have been your damage, and I should not have actually fired it. In my mind at the time, I was simply saying, okay, Congo, Fuso, who's the more broadside target? I'm engaging that one. So I derped. I apologize. Okay, going back, to, of course, to the bigger picture again, enemy team is still in a relatively decent position. If you look at it, they're still in a relatively decent position. Because had their battleships concentrated their forces, along with the fact that they do have destroyer support, there's a Minsk and a Fubuki there, they should be able to push onto our cap. They should be. And if the battleships are concentrated, and if they focus their fire on, let's say, the Scharnhorst, or they focus their fire on me, neither of us would have lasted all that long. And looking at the sort of the distribution of ships on my team, especially knowing the position of the New Mexico and the Myoko, which are like way to the south and away from your cap, had you just stepped on our cap, dealt with me and the Scharnhorst, it should have been a win. And you sort of see where the enemy team sort of falls apart here, because instead of being concentrated, they sort of spread out, right? The King George V, the Bayern, they went behind the islands, basically taking their guns out of the engagement. The Fuso, the Congo, well, they got into a close range brawl with a destroyer that didn't end too well. No idea why the Fubuki is charging to the south here. Absolutely no clue why this Fubuki is going to the south. Fubuki should have just gone to the cap. Colorado, well, gets up close to a Gade. Gade's going to just be like, all right, torpedoes. And that's going to be the end of that. But the Fubuki really misplayed there, because Fubuki, Minsk, in a combination together, not really going to be dealing with problems from the Gade here, right? Okay, so the Gade, as you can tell, torpedoes out, Colorado's going to go down. Gade's going to head south, which is not a bad choice initially, just to get rid of this Fubuki. Okay, so waiting for that to happen, hang on. There it is, Fubuki's really low, Gade's going to open fire, kill. Now, we still could have lost this engagement. Why? Because take a look at the enemy ships. They have a pretty full HP Bayern still, they have a King George V, which I'm going to be engaging, and they have a Minsk. Now, the Minsk is already on the cap. You can see the cap is starting to tick. All the Minsk has to do, essentially, is make sure that I can't get in there. Or at least if I'm going to go in there, I'm going to pay a very, very hefty price. So the Minsk could have positioned himself behind an island or something like that, and if the minute I come out, drop torpedoes, and I'm done. And I'm spotted too, because there's airplanes who are actually spotting me, so the Minsk should know exactly where I am. So had the Minsk been behind this island, I would have been in trouble, and this is why initially you see me being so hesitant and so cautious to try to get in there, because I'm like, if I try to go through that gap between the small island and the big island over at E7, E6, if the Minsk is there, I'm done. And the Minsk can get me before I can get him, because I'm being spotted by the airplane. But anyways, right? Enemy team right now has the cap advantage. They're already capping more than a quarter of the way through. The Gade on my team, who was initially engaging the Fubuki, should have looked at the big picture, realized that our cap was going to be under threat, turned around after killing off the Fubuki, come back up and help me out. Because if the Gade had come back up and helped me out, and maybe killed that Minsk, or at least spotted him, we would have a chance to potentially win. Because there's no way the enemy team can go reset their cap, right? Once our New Mexico gets onto it, no chance of the reset. But potentially, maybe this Gade was thinking, well, if we can get 2 ships on the cap, we can maybe cap faster, which really isn't going to be the case, because enemy team already passed the halfway point. So him going south could have cost us the battle. Now, do you see that smoke cloud? That's where the Minsk ended up. Sort of in the middle of the cap, which is basically the worst place to be. Had the Minsk been right behind this island, there was no way I would have been able to come out here and potentially win this game for our team. Because for me right now, even though there's 2 battleships, my priority is, hey, who's got the most cap points? Which is going to be that Minsk, because I am going to do everything I can to shoot the Minsk to reset the cap points. Now, even if I were to die, and my ship gets sunk, it won't matter, because if I can reset the Minsk, troll French dispersion there, but okay. If I can reset the Minsk, we win, period. Decision making has to be on a bigger, more global level. You have to see sort of the bigger picture. Yes, I could have shot the battleships, probably could have netted a little bit more damage, but no, the priority is that destroyer. He holds all the cap points. Reset him, we have no chance of losing. Unless, of course, all my ships on my team decide to just get off cap for reasons. But shouldn't be. So there we go. Minsk is getting taken down. Sunk the Minsk. Alright. And only one battleship remaining on their team. Absolutely no problems. I'm just going to go over there, ram them, and game's over. Done. And so, hopefully, you know, for those of you who have watched today's video, you know, if you want a key sort of takeaway from it all, try to remember, there's more to the game than just simply mechanics. Good decision making and consistently good decision making is absolutely key. And if your win rate's not where you want it to be, I want you to go ahead and re-examine your decision making. Anyways, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Aside from all that, take care of yourselves, have a good one, and I'll talk to all of you again really, really soon.